Welcome back to The Beat tonight and our special coverage. As many senators were stressing in today's marathon hearings for Trump's Supreme Court nominee, all of this is literally playing out while people vote. That's how close these hearings are to Election Day. People are already voting. Take Kentucky, where in-person voting began today, or take Texas. New signs of record turnout there. 97% of eligible voters in the county around Austin are now ready to vote. Many Democrats see that as clearly good news for Biden in a traditionally red state. While last night we were reporting on the record-breaking early vote that was approaching 10 million ballots, well, today I can report for you it's nearly 12 million. With early voting now underway, you see, in most of the country, 45 states. Biden out today in Florida, where new polls show him tied or slightly ahead of Trump. All of these are clearly bad signs for Trump because the more that people vote now, the more that they are locking in the current state of the race, where Biden holds pretty wide leads in several key states that could deliver a decisive victory, like Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, and Michigan. You see right there, leads above the margin of error. To put it simply, Democrats are not simply up in the polls. There are signs Democrats are up in registration and early vote. And strategists in both parties also say high turnout in this election is much more likely to deliver a Biden victory. So those are all pieces of evidence. But trend lines are not results. And the Biden campaign is also trying to fight off any expectation games which might lead to complacency and thus depress turnout. That's something many Democrats think ultimately hurt the party in 2016, when pundits and politicos alike declared the race practically over.
All of the numbers, all of them suggest that Hillary Clinton is a heavy favorite at this point.
Those big numbers, I think, do reflect that this thing looks, you can almost put a fork in it.
If we go to post in November with anything close to a level playing field, it's going to be a Democratic wipeout.
Two of those sound bites are from last cycle. The last one, though, is from this cycle. I want to turn to New York Times editorial board member Mara Gay and John Ralston, editor of the Nevada Independent. Both know their way around politics. Good evening. And John, I take the question right to you. The evidence matters. That's why I walked through it. Would you put a fork in anything tonight?
It's way too early for forks, even spoons. No silverware yet, I got to tell you. Listen, Biden's ahead, clearly nationally and clearly in the key states, as you pointed out. And he's ahead here in Nevada, which has been a swing state. There's not much of the early mail balloting in yet. Early voting starts Saturday. But I got to tell you, I do not think that Biden should get complacent at all. It's not just because of, I think people use the 2016 analogy too much, Ari. There were a lot of different factors back then that don't exist now, including a candidate who it later was revealed had caused schisms inside the Democratic Party that peeled off enough votes for her to lose by a combined, 87,000 votes in those three blue wall states. So I just think the circumstances are different. Sure, Biden's ahead with 3 weeks to go, but it's not over.
And to that point, let's take a look. We have, again, speaking of my control room, let's take a look at one of the pieces of sound that helps advance the conversation. Go ahead.
The most important thing for you to do to affect change? Vote.
Let's go, people.
Drop it like it's hot. Drop it like it's hot. Drop it like it's hot.
Just drop it in the box.
Mara, I wanted you to see that's the one and only Snoop Doggy Dogg, drop it like it's hot, encouraging this early voting and trying to get people out there, which, again, we're seeing, as I mentioned, the signs that more people are voting and they think that's good for Biden.
That's right. I've covered a lot of campaigns at this point in my career. And when I cover winning campaigns and really the best run campaigns, you see the operatives on the ground run that race like they are 10 points, 20 points behind until the last poll closes. And I think that's the spirit that is certainly animating a lot of Democratic and Republican operatives right now. And I think voters really, I do think have a sense of urgency. That's why we're seeing, in part, such energy at the polls. The other reason, of course, is that it's way too hard to vote in our democracy. But I really do think that this is not over until the fat lady sings, as they say. And, in some of these states, like Michigan, for example, last time around, the margin was fewer than 11,000 votes. So really, every vote does count, does matter. And I think that's the kind of energy that should animate the Democrats, especially right now.
Yeah, John, I want to ask you about the first debate because so much is happening, obviously, and Trump's COVID diagnosis and the White House problems had many repercussions. But I don't know that we've fully digested the fact that the second debate was canceled. The VP debate's sort of a separate thing. And so the first debate has a longer aftertaste, a longer shelf life that, according to a lot of Trump people, was not what they wanted. And as compared to the news, which a few million people watch and go in and out of, there was record-breaking, tens and tens of millions of people watching that debate, and overwhelmingly negative for Trump. In fact, one of his advisors, Stephen Moore, taking issue with it. Take a look.
How many of you watched the debate? It was not a great performance by Trump. In fact, I thought it was a pretty crappy performance by Trump. But I have to say, 4 years ago, I was in New York. I was at Hofstra University, which was the first debate between Hillary Clinton and Trump. And Trump was, I remember in that debate, we were like, oh my God, he was so bad in that debate, just awful. Trump rallied, and in the second and third debate, he just clobbered Hillary. And that's what's going to happen in these next couple of debates, God willing.
A bit of candor there, conceding a bad first debate, but hoping for a good second one. I ask you the metaphysical question, John. How can Trump have a good second debate if there is no second debate?
That could be difficult, Ari, and that is beyond my pay grade to answer the metaphysical question you just asked. However, I will say, doesn't that first debate seem like it was like 2 years ago, considering everything that's happened ever since? But the problem for Trump with debates is this, Ari, is that even people close to him will say privately, right? You've seen the quotes. They know he's losing. They know he's in trouble, no matter what Trump says about the polls being fake, et cetera. So if you're behind, you need to do something in the debate to try to change undecided voters' minds, right, or pull voters who are going one way to go the other. There's no evidence that what Trump did in that first debate helped him. And while some people think that Mike Pence did very well against Kamala Harris, even if that's true, it's a status quo thing anyhow, and that didn't move the polls that much. That's why a lot of Republicans, I think, were stunned when Trump decided not to do the second debate because it was a virtual debate. You need to change something. And yes, Trump tries every hour on Twitter to change things, but you need to change it in a dramatic way. And the debate would have given him an opportunity, I think.
And a follow-up to John on Nevada, and then same question to Mara. When you look at Donald Trump also just blowing up the stimulus talks and pushing forward with the Supreme Court nomination against polling that shows a lot of folks, including independents and conservatives, actually are the opposite. Conservative swing voters telling folks, well, no, fixing the economy, having COVID relief is more important as a priority. Do you see any of that playing out on the ground in Nevada or nationally?
Well, I think let's use Nevada as an example, since we've talked about this before, Ari. The Nevada economy has been absolutely devastated, maybe in a disproportionate way to other economies, because it's a one-note economy still based on gaming. And so people here could really use those checks. So sending out a check of almost any amount, but certainly another $1,200 check would mean a difference to some people here in their lives. Would it change their votes? I think that's a different question.
Mara?
Yeah, what I would say is that what Donald Trump needed to do this year is not just hold on to his base, but grow his support. And he has apparently done neither, if the polls are correct. I think that his illness and the way he responded to it was really, along with the debate as well, was really one of his last opportunities to change the direction of this race. He had a window to turn to Americans and say, listen, I've seen the light, and I now know that I need to be the big boy in the room, I need to be the adult in the room. I need to come bring Americans together, get people some relief. This is a very serious virus. But instead, he's dancing around on a stage with no mask, potentially infectious himself, and certainly spreading disinformation that is extremely dangerous about this virus. And that is just not behavior that is going to win over independents, Republicans, moderate Democrats. And in fact, it's not necessarily going to help motivate anyone who already isn't in the tank for Trump to turn out to vote for him. So, he does have that sense of kind of free falling at this point. But I think if you're the Democrats, you really never want to underestimate the enthusiasm in his base, and you want to go hard till the very end.
Yeah, you want to go hard in the paint, as it were, as Waka Flocka would say, Mara. And I think to the point about enthusiasm, that's documented because even as I just walked through the numbers showing Biden is up in key places, even today, even with those leads, there are numbers showing, as I'm sure John knows, tracking all this, that the core Trump voters are still 10% more strongly motivated to go out for Trump than Biden voters. And so you say, oh, how can two things be true? Well, you can have widespread support, but that doesn't always tell us who gets up, depending on the weather and what's going on in their life and a pandemic, and goes out and votes. And so that enthusiasm gap actually still exists, even as Biden is clearly pulling ahead in these certain measurements. We'll be tracking all of it with both of you throughout the rest of this home stretch. Mara and John, thanks to both of you. Hey, I'm Ari Melber from MSNBC. You can see more of our videos right here, or better yet, subscribe to our YouTube channel below. You could have been anywhere in the world, but you're here with us, and we appreciate that.